It's Steve here doing a review of the Ruger RXM, the collaboration between Ruger and Magpul. It is basically just a Glock Gen 3 clone with a few upgrades. So to see what's in the box, first you got your manual, lock because you have to, one magazine. It is not a Glock brand magazine, it is the Magpul PMag. And your firearm with your second magazine. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to verify this firearm is unloaded. So drop the magazine. And what I say is, see the bore, so visually inspect the chamber. See the floor. So if you can see that there's nothing through there, that means there's no magazine. So see the bore, see the floor. We have an unloaded firearm. And then also you have your Torx wrench and locator pins, and this is for the optic cut. So other than that, you just get like your warranty information up under the pad, and then there's nothing left other than your empty chamber plate. So setting the box off to the side. The RXM is basically a Glock Gen 3 clone. It accepts all Glock Gen 3 parts. So standard Glock controls, yes, you see the serial number up here, because it has a fire control unit similar to the SIG P320 and P365. So, opposite side, standard Glock controls, with the exception of this here. This pin is what secures the fire control unit in place. Other than that, magazine, you got a flat face trigger or slightly curved trigger, slide stop, and your takedown. So from here, first thing I'm going to check is the trigger. So I have a Glock Gen 4 and a trigger pull gauge. So again, first thing, see the bore, see the floor. We have an empty firearm. And again, see the bore, see the floor, empty firearm. So we're going to compare the two first. All right, starting with the Glock. Let me make sure I get this right on that trigger safety. I'm going to guess around 5.5 pounds. 4.5. So 4 pounds, 6.5 ounces. We'll do that one more time. .411. So we have an average of 4.9 pounds. So I'm not sure if John replaced, this is actually John's because I only own one Glock and it doesn't look anything like a Glock. And I have his because I'm working on it, hence the optic cut, and we're going to do an undercut here. But I'm using John's Glock. The only reason I have one is to say that I have one and to shit on them. So we'll go with the RXM next. I'm not sure if, what I was getting at was, I'm not sure if John replaced any components in his trigger other than just the trigger shoe, but the RXM, right at 6 pounds. .4 for an average of 6 pounds, 2.8 ounces. So I would have guessed the standard Glock would have been somewhere in the neighborhood of 5.5, 5 pounds, 8 to 10 ounces. So I'm going to guess that John did replace some parts. And we are going to take this apart and compare the Gen 4 frame to the RXM. But first, we'll start with the slide. Standard Glock takedown. Visually inspect the chamber. Ensure there's no magazine to have an unloaded firearm, because you do have to pull the trigger to disassemble it just like any Glock. Then I just go right under the beaver tail with my thumb, right over the top with my fingers, and I slightly pull it back just to relieve the pressure on that takedown lever, and then it just slides right off. So you can see when comparing the two that there's a metal component that goes all the way across here in the RXM, because that is part of your fire control unit. So it's very, very thin polymer along there. So it does look like Ruger shaved some of the frame away in order to fit the fire control unit, which isn't really an issue. You can see it down in here. The frame is thinned out up at the top, but it's back flush with the fire control unit inside the trigger well, back when it does make contact with the fire control unit housing. So you can see the differences there. Again, this is a Gen 4, this is a Gen 3. The RXM is a Gen 3, and it will take Gen 3 components. So we're going to set this off to the side. And I'm going to pull some stuff up to take out the fire control unit. So to take out the fire control unit, you have to take out the takedown lever, this new integrated pin here that holds the fire control unit in place, and then you also have to take out that pin as well. They did do away with the pin in the back of the Beavertail, like what's in most Glocks. So to start, everything is a nail when I am a tool, or a hammer, however the saying goes. These pins are very stiff. I'm sure they'll wear in, but for now, everything is a nail. And then this just taps out. There's no real finesse needed. And then when those three components are out, you can remove your fire control unit. So those three components there. Do not lose your takedown lever spring, the leaf spring that is typical of the previous generations of Glock. I have lost that thing on more than one occasion because it just flings right out because I'm not paying attention. So do keep that in mind. Be gentle with that little guy. Again, what I do is I apply pressure as close to the takedown lever as possible, and I push that leaf spring all the way down as far as it'll go with a Glock tool, and then it'll just fall right out. But when you take out the fire control unit, it says to lift from the front. So your grip module is really nothing special. I'm not sure the fiberglass content yet, so for anybody that wants to play with that, that's a topic for a later date. But it is Glock 19 sized for now. When you look at the case does look like it has additional room in it at the bottom of the cutout for the firearm, as if it will still accommodate a 17 size grip module. So with the fire control unit, it does take Gen 3 components. So if you want to change that somewhat curved trigger shoe, it appears as though you can just take out the trigger pin and you can replace the shoe, or you can replace the trigger bar, because everything looks to be integrated in the same manner as it is in a Gen 3. So to put it back in, you drop it in from the rear and you just press down in the front. So from here, I'm going to start with the takedown lever because I hate this thing. Ooh, that is a good thing to note. I'm glad I stopped before I went full tool, because you can see in 1 second that right in here is the little spring for the slide stop lever right there. So you have to press that down, which it does look to be slightly elongated from the Gen 3, so I'm not sure how well you can see it, but right there, that spring is not protruding in a Gen 3 Glock, but here it is, and I'm glad it is, because all you have to do is just push down on it with your finger as you tap the pin back in, and then you don't have to crush the little spring right there. So to start with the slide, we have from the factory, I'm not sure if it's stainless or carbon, but it is a steel guide rod with a captured spring. So it is pretty nice to have. Barrel, I have no details on the barrel at this moment. I know Glock Gen 5 advertises the Gen 5 barrel as the marksman barrel, but I have no details on this one. And then a slide. General 19 Gen 3 slide. However, I'm going to grab the little packet with the Torx wrench and the locator pins, because when you get into the optic footprint, yes, I pre-loosened the screws because they were kind of stuck, a little more than hand tight, I would reckon. Just a plastic cover plate here, nothing special. And then what appears to be a universal footprint. So it does have locator pins if you want to put in 2 for your RMR or 4 for your Delta Point Pro, whatever it is you want. It does come with 4 locator pins, or recoil bosses, whatever you want to call them. I call them recoil bosses, but essentially a universal platform, which is nice. So, John and I had put quite a few rounds through this thing initially in the snow the other day, and a couple hundred rounds. I think we only had 1 failure to fire, and I couldn't find the round to see if it was a fault with the ammunition or the firearm itself. So, in a couple hundred rounds, it did function nicely. It was pretty accurate, but again, we were not shooting with a red dot, so a lot of it could be chalked up to operator error as far as the accuracy. So putting a dot on it, we can have an accuracy test later. But initially, the only complaint that I had, oh wow, I guess I should have put the barrel and everything in first. How responsible of me. So, taking this apart, it is, again, Gen 3 components. It does, because I did strip out the slide, it does still use a channel liner, which, if you're going to Cerakote it or you're going to put it in the oven or whatever, be aware of that. I don't like channel liners, but again, I'm not some Glock engineer that gets paid tons of money to put a piece of plastic in an all-metal slide. So, let me put this back together. The other thought that I had is what is one of the most up-and-coming replacement barrels that you can get for a Glock 19? I would argue that it's the Radian Ramjet and Afterburner. So this is a problem that I had with the Gray Ghost slides, the Gray Ghost V4, that has pronounced angular cuts at the front. Those angular cuts do not fit inside the Ramjet, or I guess I should say Afterburner. It is not compatible. Without having one readily available and actually checking, I can't definitively say whether or not it's compatible, but at first glance, it does not look to be, because the Ramjet and Afterburner are very form-fitted to the contours of a standard Glock 19 slide. So those are just two more considerations. From here, in hundreds of rounds, the only complaint that I had is if you compare, let's see if I can get this in the camera, the Beavertail to a Glock Beavertail. So Glock Beavertails, let me see if I can even zoom in further. Okay, the Glock Beavertail. It is somewhat squared off here, and it provides good protection. Nobody has ever claimed that Glocks are poorly designed, but the RXM is much more rounded. So the reason I dislike this is because I don't know if I have just fat boy hands, but when the slide cycles, it clips my thumb right there. So in just a natural two-hand shooting grip, trying to hold my thumb in exact placement, it put a hole in my little Under Armour gloves. I didn't have super thick gloves, but it did put a hole because it repeatedly, over hundreds of rounds, just kept riding right into my glove right there. So I feel like if it had a more squared off Beavertail like the Glock does, that I wouldn't have those issues. But again, I don't have huge hands. I have small hands. I guess they're just meaty with sausage fingers. I'm not entirely sure. But other than that, that is my only complaint. It did function very well. We put hundreds of rounds through it. The one failure to fire that we did have, I didn't recover the round from the snow. I just went straight into remedial action drills and fired the next round. I don't know if it was a light primer strike. I don't know if it was a hard primer. I don't know if it was a fault with the primer itself, but only one round did not fire. Every round ejected. There were no issues. It is what it is. It's a Gen 3 Glock that has a fire control unit, and it has an optic cut, and you're getting it for what, $400? So the only thing that I would say is to be aware of your hand placement when you're in your natural shooting position, and test that out if you want to see if it's right for you, because just lining it up, I'm going to take a shot, and trying not to move my hand, it still digs right into my thumb. And I'm not a fan. Other than that, I have no complaints. It's not flimsy by any stretch. I can really wrench on it. It's not going anywhere. I just have to. You'll see in some of the videos, I look at it and I'm like, what the hell? Because I've never really had that issue before of like slide bite. I don't wrap. I don't do anything stupid. I just have, I don't know, a fat, meaty hand, I guess. But just cranking on it, wrenching down, you're not going to hurt it. Again, it's a Gen 3 Glock. So I hope this helps. If you have any questions, feel free, reach out, Titan Tactical, www.titan-tactical.com. We are Titan Tactical LLC on Instagram and Titan Tactical on Facebook. So again, hope that helps and appreciate you watching.